There are three elements to the definition of professional skepticism. The first is the requirement for the practitioner to make a critical assessment of the validity of evidence obtained and to do so with a question in mind. An attitude of professional skepticism also requires the practitioner to be alert to evidence that contradicts or brings into question the reliability of documents or representations made by the responsible party. There are many dimensions to the element of critical assessment. The most important of these are arguably the search for knowledge and the suspension of judgment. The search of knowledge refers to the desire to investigate beyond the obvious, as well as the desire to corroborate. This takes knowledge and understanding further by requiring the practitioner to draw inferences and apply evidence-based thinking. Suspension of judgment requires the practitioner to withhold judgment until appropriate evidence is obtained. For example, let's consider the judge in a murder case that has received a lot of media coverage. The media has portrayed the defendant in very poor light due to his previous drug-related convictions. How will the judge exercise critical assessment? In exercising critical assessment, the judge would not automatically assume guilt. This does not mean that the judge should ignore other information. In other words, the judge would draw inferences to previous convictions when judging the defendant's character and regard for rules and regulations. This would also be a consideration in the sentence that the judge would hand down. However, in arriving at the verdict, the judge would require evidence and proof to substantiate or corroborate the arguments put forward by the defense and prosecution. The judge would then arrive at a verdict by weighing up the facts and evidence at his or her disposal. The second element of professional skepticism is the question in mind. Having a question in mind refers to the disposition to inquiry, in other words, asking questions. It also includes a sense of doubt. Having a question in mind is also characterized by autonomy and self-esteem. Autonomy refers to the moral independence and conviction to decide for oneself rather than accepting the claims of others, while self-esteem refers to the self-confidence to resist and to challenge assumptions or conclusions. For example, assume you are the auditor of Blue Limited. The management of Blue Limited decided to revalue their assets in the current year. How would you demonstrate a question in mind in relation to the revaluation? As an auditor with a question in mind, you would make inquiries regarding the reasons for the revaluation and the method used to arrive at the revaluation amount. You would exercise autonomy by conducting your own revaluation calculations or obtaining the use of your own expert. You would not simply accept the claims by management or management's expert. You would exercise self-esteem by inspecting the calculations and assumptions of management's calculations and challenge the reasonableness of the assumptions in respect to other entities operating in similar industries. Alertness requires the practitioner to be aware of contradictions and anomalies. In order to be alert, the practitioner should have an interpersonal understanding. In other words, the practitioner needs to recognize people's motivations and perceptions can lead them to provide biased or misleading information. For example, assume you are the auditor of Orange Limited. You have been informed that management's bonuses are dependent on the achievement of a preset net profit target. In the current year, revenue increased more than 10% in comparison to prior year, while tax expense decreased by 13%. Management are pleased with Orange Limited's performance as they have satisfied the bonus requirement. How will you react to this information in respect of alertness? Firstly, you'd be alert to the possibility that the net profit may be misstated in order to meet the target. You would also be aware of the increase in revenue with the decrease in tax expense. This appears to be a contradiction to the normal relationship between revenue and tax expense. In other words, you would expect that an increase in revenue would also result in an increase in tax expense. You would further recognize that management may provide misleading information to cover up possible misstatements. To recap, professional skepticism requires practitioners to make critical assessments with a question in mind and to be alert for any anomalies and contradictory evidence.